So this week's Inside the Lords. It's actually been very busy at the Lords this week because we've had two important debates that I participated in. The first one was on the great plan for growth and the whole question of the economy. Let me tell you, I believe in economic growth. I think that we need to have productive economic investment. In the sense that I agree with Liz Truss on the rhetoric, that's fair enough. However, what I pointed out in that debate was that the great plan for growth doesn't have any of that in it. It just amounts to a load of tax cuts with the hope, the magical thinking, that by freeing up more money, that somehow it will be invested productively. The enterprise zones sound great, but there's no direction to them. And the one thing that you can say is there's no plan. I mention that not because I'm particularly enjoying the economy collapsing around us or the way that the opposition parties to the Tories are thoroughly enjoying the humiliation of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, because actually I would prefer that the country wasn't in quite so much turmoil, but because it shows you that politics is a bit more complicated than just taking at face value what people say. However, those people who are saying that Liz Truss has to reverse the tax cuts, and as I speak, there are screeching U-turns happening everywhere you look. The problem is that all sides underestimate the real depth of the economic problems we face, that were not just created by Kwarteng going off on one and announcing a sort of IEA-inspired set of tax cuts, but the fact that we've actually been living on cheap money, not producing anything, being held back by one thing that has grown, which is an army of consultants and environmental NGOs and all the rest of it getting in the way of any kind of growth taking place, and an inability on anyone's part to recognise just what needs to be done in order to grow the economy. So I spoke in that debate. My opponents were on all sides in that instance, and I was frustrated that it didn't go as a debate much beyond the headlines or much beyond the sound bites. Then on Tuesday we had a big and important debate which is about the Northern Irish Protocol Bill. This bill has been introduced, was started off being introduced by Boris Johnson as a way of dealing with the problem of the protocol, which has proved to be a real barrier on Brexit finally being seen through, has had real nasty implications for people in Northern Ireland who will be treated equally under the law, because actually dumping Northern Ireland in order to into the clutches of the European Court of Justice means that they do not have equal say over their laws as anyone else in the United Kingdom. And people were bemused that I ended up defending the DUP, loyalists, unionists, people I wouldn't normally get on with, because they were blamed by some people for the unstable conditions that are happening in Northern Ireland, rather than blaming the protocol itself, which has created the problems. And the thing that really, really frustrates me is the disingenuous nature of the debate, in which people were saying this is what Brexit did, and you voted David Frost, you voted for this protocol, you negotiated this protocol, failing to acknowledge that the reason why people looked over the weaknesses of the protocol when it went through was precisely because Brexit was about to be completely thwarted by establishment figures who were trying to overturn the democratic vote of 2016. So yeah, the protocol aspect of the agreement was a fudge, was useless, was problematic, but we just needed to get out of the EU. And now we need to resolve the problem of the protocol. There were not very many people who supported the protocol bill, including from government benches, because after all, so many of the Tories were implicated in that attempt to try and stop Brexit happening. The other atmosphere in the Lords this week, of course, is that everybody is agog with what's happening in politics. The fact that we're witnessing the collapse of the Conservative Party, people feeling as though they're not represented, feeling bitter that maybe there was some internal coup that got rid of Boris Johnson, that somehow we've got Liz Truss who doesn't seem to know what she's doing, and she wasn't even a popular candidate in the leadership race, but somehow managed to wangle her way into becoming the Prime Minister. Then a complete meltdown, lack of loyalty amongst Conservative MPs who are now turning against her because of the polls, because of the market instability, the fact that I don't believe that there is an economic plan of any worthiness, but I don't think that we should focus on tax, because that is the most superficial way of understanding the economy. It's actually got nothing to do with ensuring that productive activity occurs, all of these things. And a Labour Party who understandably are enjoying the fact that they are doing massively well in the polls, but actually have got very little to offer in terms of any answers politically about how we deal with the economy, but just more broadly. So what do I, independent, non-aligned peer in the House of Lords, have to say about it? Well, I can just tell you now that these problems will not be solved within the palaces of Westminster. They have to be resolved, and we have to start taking action to make them resolved by agency of ordinary people, ordinary voters, ordinary citizens, beginning to spell out exactly what we expect of our political leaders, what kind of economic growth we want and need, how it can be achieved locally and regionally, giving them the ideas that they desperately haven't got. But it's not just the economy, stupid, if I can put it that way, because politics has not been suspended just because we're in the middle of an economic crisis. In fact, I would argue that some of those trends that we've seen in terms of attacks on free speech, in terms of the big culture wars issues, which everybody wants to pretend are just second order, are actually crucial to us solving some of these problems, because it requires the rebuilding of a political base of engaged people who are able to speak their minds, speak freely and speak openly. And the attacks on values over recent years has actually undermined our confidence even that we can make a difference and make a change. So that's why this year's Battle of Ideas really matters. So I've got my Battle of Ideas brochures, hot off the press in the sense that you can now find out exactly what's happening over this weekend, 15th and 16th of October. If by any remote chance you haven't got your ticket, you must get it and come along, or turn up on the door and buy one. Really, this is the way to rebuild politics. There will be 100 panel discussions, 400 speakers. I'm exhausted in the preparation of it, and I've got a cough and a cold, but I'm not going to be deterred. We are going to ensure that this is not where experts at the front sit and tell us what to do, but simply initiate public conversations that we all join in on. And this week I've been particularly concerned about the fact that Mayor Forstater, who is one of our speakers, the co-founder of Sex Matters, a heroine in terms of taking up the gender critical cause, has been taken off and suspended from Twitter. I mean, if ever that was symbolic of free speech being under threat, and somebody who's so important in the public debate about women's rights, about safeguarding in children, is just silenced in that way. We've also witnessed in the last 10 days the collapse of Mermaids organisation, which has been an organisation that's been arguing for transgender ideology and identity politics associated with trans, particularly when it comes to young people and children, who in fact had the nerve to complain to the Charities Commission and take it to court about the LGB Alliance. Absolutely atrocious behaviour, trying to stop them having charitable status, and now themselves being exposed as unfit for any kind of relationship with safeguarding or young people. So I've enjoyed that unravelling, because they've honestly deserved it. And yet, I say to you, it's never as simple as that. It's not just a question of cancelling this organisation or being delighted that one group has gone. What we must do, what we have to do, is to debate these issues fairly and squarely, and never, ever, ever run away from the arguments that need to be had. And there will be hundreds, thousands of young people at this event who won't agree with anything I've just said, who don't agree with me on the environment, don't agree with a lot of the things that I've just argued in the House of Lords this week. But it's my responsibility, your responsibility, our responsibility to persuade them round, or to have the arguments out. So I'm going to show you now where I am, and we're going to walk up here, talk about DIY filmmaking. Right, walking up here. I think they did a sound check in the very place where we are doing our festival, because where we are is outside the Battle of Ideas, next to the wonderful Church House bookshop, and they will have a bookstore, and they will have all the books of our speakers. And here we are by Church House, which is where I expect to see you over the weekend. Please come along, because democracy is actually rather fragile at the moment and politics is in a mess. But we can't just moan about it and complain about it or put our heads in the sands. What we need to do is to take control of politics and political debate. Free speech allowed is the motto of this festival. Come along and assert yours. See you on Saturday and Sunday at Church House, Battle of Ideas Festival. See you then.
Lifestyle and behaviour that are outlawed by the Bible and contradict our ambitions and way of life. The bill was initiated and steered by anti-faith groups with a camouflage of concern for our...
Be honest, who'd have thought it? I just bumped into a demonstration actually outside Church House, but aiming at the Department of Education, of some Orthodox Jewish citizens of this country who are completely correctly making the point that the schools bill is a threat to homeschooling. And their slogans are interesting because they say no to state indoctrination. And in fact, we've got a session at the Battle of Ideas on whether schools are indoctrinating our kids or not. It also says that the oppressive schools bill, I'm just reading a banner here, undermines freedom of religion. That banner's got a big Union Jack on the side of it, which is, just shows you. And actually, we've got a session on the importance of freedom of religion. Now, regardless of whether I agree with these good folk who are here making their point and exhibiting their right to protest perfectly reasonably in a democracy, I don't agree with them on many things, but they are right that there are dangerous trends that are attacking religious freedom, and there are dangerous trends in the schools bill and in fact in education in general, which means that parental authority is being undermined. So I say good luck to all. I hope the Department of Education, which we're standing outside, takes notice, and I'll certainly be citing them the next time we discuss the schools bill in the House of Lords.